Hello again, I am Blunty. Now, normally when I would record a video that is a two-camera piece like this, I would stare right down the lens barrel there and make sort of a fake eye contact thing with you as a way to engage you as a viewer. I'm looking at you, you're looking at me, we're having a conversation. That's kind of the psychological impression you're supposed to get when you do a two-camera piece like this. It's about more engagement. However, today, I'm mostly going to be looking over off camera in this direction here. On the one hand, because without sustained eye contact, this is kind of more what like talking to me in the real world is like. And also because I have, in fact, scripted a lot of this out. Without doing that, I fear that I would ramble and go off track quite heavily because I have a lot to say on this sort of stuff, and I'm having a lot of difficulty getting my thoughts on a single track over the last few days, relevant as it is. So I'm already rambling. What I wrote here is I'd ramble and sidetrack so much it would heavily dilute what I'm trying to communicate, and I've just done exactly that. So this is why. I've already stripped 2/3 of what I typed out into this document into a different document because even while trying to type this stuff out, I rambled and sidetracked quite significantly. But preface done, shall we begin? Elon Musk has come out as autistic, and there's a lot of conversation going on in places like Twitter about this and what it means, and quite a lot of it is actually quite negative. Musk telling us that he's autistic on Saturday Night Live. That's right, he was on Saturday Night Live. He hosted Saturday Night Live, and he said one of the first things he said was he's autistic. Elon Musk coming out as autistic is about as important and vital as Elon Musk telling us that he had a banana once. It in no way does anything useful or important for the autistic community at all. And in fact, the very first thing he did after telling us that he had autism, and we'll get to that in a second, was make a joke about all the standard cliches and tropes. He joked about how he wouldn't be making much eye contact with the rest of the cast, which plays right into the lowest hanging fruit of what normals expect people with autism to be like, and quite clearly that's not unfair necessarily, but it's certainly how we're most always shown in TV and movies and stuff like that, where when we're in TVs and movies, which is hardly ever, and when we are in TVs and movies, we get to be the magic moron. I'm not just plucking that term out of midair. That's what the trope is generally referred to as, the magic moron. People who are socially or psychologically or emotionally stunted or inept or damaged in some way, but they've got this special skill, this special ability. They they understand computers really well, or they're really good at building things. That character who makes everyone around them uncomfortable but is useful because they have a magic moron skill. Usually it's unusual intelligence or some hyper-specific skill set that makes them useful enough to the other people around them for them to be tolerated. That's the only thing, that's the only reason they're there. If they didn't have this special skill, this special ability, this unique skill set or knowledge, then they wouldn't be tolerated. There would be no place for them on the team, in the group. That is their only worth. Not them as a person, them as a skill. And quite annoyingly, almost every time you see an autistic coded character on screen, that's their role, that's their job. That's really dehumanizing. Really, 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 really dehumanizing. I mean, jokes and reinforcing cliches about eye contact and whatnot aside, what he did next was the most offensive thing, by a long shot. Because he then joked about how people can relax because he's actually pretty good at running human in emulation mode. If you don't understand why that is incredibly hurtful and offensive and horrible, then I mean I guess that's partly why this video is here, to try and help you explain, or to try and help you understand why that is so hurtful. Because in saying that, despite having the autism, people can relax. He's pretty good at pretending to be human. That is unquestionably dehumanizing every single person with autism. Every single autistic person on the face of the planet has instantly been dehumanized by that one statement. It means they're not actually people. They're not actually humans. but they're okay when they're pretending to be. If they're good at pretending to be normal, it's fine. It's acceptable. You can treat them like people if they're good at pretending to be people. That's horrific, Elon. Fucking horrific. You monster. Now, this Saturday Night Live thing where Elon got on the stage and went, hey, everybody, I've got the autisms, but it's all right. I'll try and make eye contact and I'll pretend to be human for a while. So I won't make you too uncomfortable. For some reason, some usually non-autistic people are holding this up as a look and see. Even the autists can be successful, which is so disgustingly ableist. It literally makes me feel sick right in my stomach. Like there's a knot in my stomach every time I think about it. Every time someone says, oh, look at Elon. He's done so well for an autistic person. But now he's out there using it as an excuse, as a scapegoat for his shittier behavior. He was like talking about, oh, I know I've said some weird and goofy stuff in the past, but I paid for some rockets and some electric cars, claiming that he reinvented no, he didn't reinvent the electric car. He hired people who reinvented the electric car. Again, making himself more important than everybody else around him. Very, very rich white guy behavior. No credit to any of the actual engineers who did the work. It wasn't like, oh, I found the best people in the world and we did this together. No, I did this. I sent robots to Mars. No, you didn't, Elon. You just paid for it. But in holding himself aloft like this, saying, oh, it's okay if I'm weird sometimes because I make robots and electric cars and I'm autistic, by the way. He's holding himself aloft as some sort of autism role model. He came out on stage and said, I'm the first person with autism to host Saturday Night Live, which, by the way, is not true. What an accomplishment that is. How heroic it is of me to overcome my autisms, to not only be born rich, but to be on Saturday Night Live. And like I said, by the way, he wasn't the first. Dan Aykroyd, as far as we know, was. Might have been other people, but they haven't been open about it. But Dan Aykroyd is certainly the first person to host Saturday Night Live who we know is an autistic person. Musk is a lousy role model for anybody at all on anything. He's kind of a shitty person if you look at how he treats other people. For example, his own workers. Remember that whole thing with that I don't know, what was it called? An epidemic? Yeah, why don't you have a quick Google about how his workers were treated during that epidemic and how he was handling that. Yeah, Elon's a shitty person. And as a self-proclaimed banner carrier for the autistic community, well, I'm not seeing many of us out there happy about his self-appointed role here. And yes, by the way, I don't know if I've mentioned it in the video already. I don't think it was part of the script. I might have mentioned it offhand in the opening. But yes, I am actually autistic. Hashtag actually autistic. And I've had a lot of conversations about being autistic on live streams over on Twitch, but not so much here on this channel, because here on this channel, the videos I make are usually about, technology and gadgets and cameras and video games and sort of news and whatnot surrounding that sort of stuff, and very infrequently about me as a person and me sort of living my life. I think maybe I'll start changing that, because most people's reactions when I have said or mentioned, oh yeah, I'm autistic, their reactions are, oh, I couldn't tell, or, oh, I'd never have known. You seem so normal. Which again, they're trying to be kind, but it's really hurtful when people say that. It's like, oh, you're pretty good at pretending to be normal. I would have never have guessed you're autistic. And that is admittedly part of the problem here, because autistic people can be pretty damn good at making ourselves invisible, because we know what happens when we're not invisible. We know how we get treated, how people react to us. We get pitied or patronized or awkwardly joked about. People trying to be accepting but othering us in really obvious and significant ways, and we just get treated like, well, something not quite a person, not quite a proper, complete operational person. It makes normal people uncomfortable to interact with a lot of autistic people. especially those who are less good at emulating human mode. And we do that because we don't always follow the normal standard social scripts, either because we're incapable of doing it or we're just out of the energy it takes to mask. Our behavior can be confronting, it can be challenging, it's unfiltered and not correct, socially acceptable, dance that's required of regular people who, they do it so naturally, so well. It's just been indoctrinated in them. It's just part of what, society expects behavior to flow a certain way, and small talk happens a certain way. And a lot of autistic people, we can't operate that way, at least for not very long. So when the mask falls away, we get mocked or avoided or chastised for the behavior, or almost as bad, we get forgiven for it because we can't help it. We're autistic. It's patronizing. It's infantilizing. And it's hurtful. It's damaging. And all because people don't understand in their ignorance, in their shifting uncomfortability. We do things like take statements too literally, or they think we can't read emotions on other people properly or immediately, so they talk down to us, or they start talking slower, or over-explain themselves, or another quote-unquote typical autistic behavior is in our efforts to engage with other people. When someone's telling us a story about something that happened, we will often offer up a story related to that, a similar experience or a similar feeling, as an effort to try and engage, to try and connect. And some other people will see that as the autistic person not listening to them and trying to make it all about us. It's not what we're doing. We're desperately trying to connect, to find common ground. Because our experience of the world and your experience of the world might not have that much common ground. So when we find it, we try and latch onto it instinctively, desperately, because we just want to be seen as another person. Oh, you've had that experience? I've had that experience. In this way, we are the same. We're not different. You can treat me like a normal person. But of course, the issue is there are so many misunderstandings and tropes and cliches out there about how autistic people act or fail to act enough to fit in. There's tremendous amounts of ignorance out there. And Musk is a real shithead for reinforcing some of that with his human emulation crack. And that's why I've been trying so hard, and it is very difficult to open up and be clear about what my lived experience has been like being autistic. And that is, by the way, I've flip-flopped between this along the video, kind of to drive the point home. You'll notice I used it differently at different points in this video, and if you go back and rewatch it, you'll hear when and why I used it this way. But I'm a person with autism. I'm an autistic person. I don't have autism. It is a very slight grammatical difference, sure, and I'm sure you're already going, well, that's a pretty autistic thing to be really precise about something that doesn't really mean anything. Have autism, got autism, are autistic. What's the difference? Well, the difference is this isn't a sickness. It's not a disease. It's not something I acquired. I didn't catch it like a virus. It didn't happen to me. It wasn't something that went wrong when I was a kid. This isn't damage. You can't fix it because I'm not broken. You can't cure it because it's not a disease. It is as much a part of me, probably more so a part of me, than the color of my eyes. The color of my eyes is meaningless. The color of my eyes has had almost no factor in who I became. I don't know, maybe I would have been treated slightly better if I was prettier and had blue eyes and dark hair, because, But autism is so much deeper part of me and irremovable part of me. I don't know, maybe it's part of my skeleton is a better metaphor. I don't know. And you'll hear that phrase a lot in minority groups, the lived experience. It means there are aspects about experiencing the world and society and other people that are directly influenced by who we are. Things outsiders, for want of a better word, can only really understand on a shallower intellectual level. A more accessible metaphor might be to talk about people of color or the queer community. There are ways they get treated, they get reacted to, either actively or passively, and incidentally a lot of the time as well. You know, stuff nobody else really thinks about, but you notice if you're on the other side of the fence. Things that wouldn't otherwise be that way if you weren't non-typical. And being autistic is like that. It's a lived experience. I can explain to you how I interact with the world, how it flows into me, and how I try and process it. And I can do it in plain language, and I can do it in metaphor that makes it easier for some people to understand. But unless you live with it, through it, as it, you cannot fully comprehend. And this isn't a failing on either side. It's just what lived experience means. I can intellectually understand and emotionally empathize with a trans person, for example, and how they experience the world. I can listen to their stories. I can empathize. I can emotionally connect with them, but I'll never really understand. Not like they do. That experience is inherently foreign to me because that's not who I am. That's who they are. And it's the same thing to a lesser or greater extent. I don't know, because again, frame of references. But it's a similar thing at the very least of what being autistic is. It's inherently part of who we are. It affects how we interact with the world and how the world interacts with us. And so inherently must affect our lives in a way that people who don't have this, who aren't this, cannot understand. Impossible. If I wasn't autistic, if I wasn't a person with autism, I literally would not be the person I am. I couldn't be. I'd be somebody entirely different. I would have a completely different life, completely different personality, completely different friends, completely different job, completely different aptitudes. Because that's how deep autism runs in a person. It affects everything that comes in or out. It has to. It's by nature, it does. And this is why Musk's human emulation shit is so hurtful, because, again, using the queer community as an example, and hopefully I'm not getting this wrong and doing this the wrong way, but it makes for a useful metaphor because there are more conversations happening about queer stuff than there is about autistic stuff in a lot more places to people who wouldn't ordinarily be exposed to it right now. So it makes a useful touchstone because there are some common linkages. This lived experience is why you see some of the people in the queer community be so flamboyantly loud and obvious about their identity, loudly wrapping it around them and wearing their queerness as a costume for everybody to see, unavoidably. And this performance is not, as many so clueless hetero folk think and accuse them of, trying to make their entire personal identity about their sexuality. That's, being gay is not a personality. You've heard it, surely. That's not what it's about. It's what we do when we're done trying to hide or suppress who we are. When we've finally got enough tools, we've made enough tools, we've built enough support, we've gathered enough support and strength and pride and understanding in who we are to be able to finally claim out loud and in fullness and in incompleteness who we are. This is who I am. I'm done hiding. I'm done apologizing. Ba-ba-ba-da. Glitter. We wave this flag of pride in our self-identity to other people just like us, so that they can know they're not as alone as they very often feel, as we used to feel. Unseen, not understood, hidden or forced to hide. Or learning to hide, learning to mask, learning to pretend to be something we're not, just so we can just move through the world without having to be judged for it, to cope with it, to be treated differently, to be treated as different. Because nobody wants that. We just want to be people living our lives. Wherein fear of judgment and ignorance and hatred, one might have done everything possible to not be noticed before. Now we seek out the spotlight. We wave the flags. So our friends can see us completely. And so those who don't understand us can know that we're here, and denying us won't work. We are here. You can't pretend we don't exist. You can't box us up into cute little tropes for your TV where, oh, he's so socially inept, but oh my gosh, he's good at hacking computers. That's useful. I guess we'll keep him around. And this kind of shit is why this Musk thing made me so frustrated. His comments about emulating human mode are pitiful, shameful. We don't have autism, we are autistic, and we can only ever really thrive as people, as humans, and be treated as people, as humans, when we embrace that instead of trying to suppress it for the sake of other people or for the sake of how they are going to treat us. Imitating neurotypical people just to get by, to cope, so it makes them feel comfortable. It's a lie about who we are. It's a lie to everybody else. And it's telling other autistic people out there that trying to act less autistic just to be accepted is the way to be successful, to be rich and powerful, just like Musk. You have to be good at pretending to be, you have to be good at emulating human mode. That is the way to be accepted. That is the path to success, to glory. That's incredibly hurtful and damaging. It's not helpful. Musk, you are not an example. You're an example of exactly what we shouldn't be doing. Because I know I've spent way more time and effort and energy and will and strength and emotion desperately trying to fit in enough to be accepted. And it has done damage to me as a person, damage to my relationships with other people, both professional and interpersonal and romantic. And it's the kind of damage that can't be taken back. It can't be undone. It can't be fixed, mended, patched over. It's there. And that's it. And it's damage that I should have never allowed myself to condone, much less enforce, with my own actions of hiding who I was and who I am for so long. Again, for fear of how I would be treated, how other people would judge me in the framework of an autistic. I wanted people to see me as a person, not an autistic person doing well in spite of being autistic. Not oh, he's managed to accomplish this, or he's really good at this. Oh, isn't he doing well in spite? I don't want to be seen that way. That's why I hit it that way. I wanted to be seen as a person accomplishing the things I'm accomplishing, saying things I'm saying, doing things I'm doing, not because of or in spite of autism, but just because that's who I am. And in recent years, again, it's really been in the last 4 or 5 years that I've openly spoken about this to anybody who isn't an IRL friend. I've started to understand more and more how important it is to share those lived experiences so people don't have to feel so alone like I did for an enormous chunk of my life. I felt alone and misunderstood and isolated and hopeless. So people like Elon Musk stomping around saying, hey, get good at pretending to be human, is impossibly toxic. Don't listen to him. Don't listen to him. I'm not going to hold myself up as a role model. All I can do is talk about what I've lived through. If you relate to some of it, if it's useful to you, take it. If it's not, hopefully you find something else out there. Somebody else out there who has a shared experience you can latch onto it so you don't feel alone. There's a big chunk of video there, which I think I'll edit out because it feels like a cliche reality TV emotional moment thing where it's just me being introspective and looking down and getting a bit choked up emotionally for a second. I think I'll cut that out of the video because it does feel cliched and it might feel performative, but just so you know, it was there and it was real. I got swallowed up by it for a second there. But in any case, thank you for watching. I am Blunty, and I will catch you next time. And I feel certain we'll talk about this stuff again. If you made it to the end of the video, well done. Your attention span is incredible. Thank you to the patrons, as always, of course.